Great. Okay, ready?
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals. With us this evening, board members Nicholas Gray and board members Brian Hurley. The first matter that we're going to hear is the application of Jason and Casey Sullivan. I'm going to summarize this particular application. It's dated September 8th, 2020. This matter was before the Board of Appeals on November, well, I guess it was November 19. That's right, November 19, 2020. The applicants are seeking variances in the special permit with respect to their property, which is located at 20 Ferncroft Road in Milton. The applicants are proposing to build a one-story addition with a deck to the rear of their property, which lies in a residency district. According to the plot plan that was originally filed in this application, the addition and the deck were going to be 6 feet 9 inches from the left side property line, when under section 61 of the bylaw, 10 feet were required. And the applicant is also seeking a special permit to build a temporary apartment in the new premises, and want to put that application at the same time that build out the addition. And section 3A9F provides that the temporary apartment technically would be required to be located in an existing structure. So the applicant is seeking a variance to allow that special permit. We did a hearing on this, and the board was discussing the issue, and the principal issue of contention was the left side lot line. And subsequently, the applicant within the last 2 or 3 days has filed an amendment to their application for a variance in the form of a new plot plan. This plot plan is by C&G Survey Company of Situate, Massachusetts. And they have moved the proposed addition from 6.9 feet from the sidewalk line to 10.5 feet at the rear of the proposed new addition, and 10.3 feet from 10 feet 3 inches from the beginning of the proposed apartment, so that the outside of the 10-foot prohibition. That's being substituted for the existing plot plan. Well, I think that fairly summarizes the status of the hearing. We did continue the hearing to allow the applicant to consult with their applicant and to see whether it's possible to move the addition more than 10 feet off the sideline. And on the right sideline here, there's the 14 foot of that's without a preamble.
Hi.
Welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Kathy Hurley. Thank you. Thank you so much for knocking. I appreciate
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add in support of your application that you haven't previously to the board with?
No, we just moved it into so we didn't have to get the variance anymore.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say in support of your variances?
No, sir.
Okay. The only thing I would point out is that the applicant did file a short letter with the board on July 6, 2020, saying that the proposed new living space is going to be for Jason's mother. who was the previous owner of this property for over 34 years. And her name is Suzanne, and she was recently widowed. And the applicants believe that giving her the benefit of this in-law apartment would be comforting to her in her sorrow and would eliminate the financial stress of both of living alone. And that the applicants plan on living in this residence, they say, for the next 30 years. So if you have nothing further to add, let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Hurley, do you have any further questions of the applicants?
I do not. I was very familiar with this from a previous hearing, and I've looked at the plan that was recently submitted, and I think I understand the situation. Thank you.
Mr. Gray, do you have any questions for the applicants?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Let me then ask if there's anybody present there in virtual land who wishes to be heard in support of the Sullivans' applications for variances and a special permit. And there's no such person present. Is there anybody present who wishes to either ask questions of the applicants or speak in opposition to their application for a variance and a special permit for this in-law apartment? Okay, and the record will indicate there's no such person present. So that being the case, we're going to close the evidence portion of this hearing at the present time, and we'll open the matter up for discussion and a vote of the Board of Appeals. So, Mr. Brian Hurley, do you want to be heard first?
Sure. I mean, very briefly, I'm very happy that the applicant was able to change the plan to eliminate the sort of portion of their plan that had been troubling to their neighbor. I'm happy that that was able to be accommodated. I think that the proposal as it's been amended is a good one, and I would be inclined to vote in favor of the requested relief.
Okay. Mr. Gray, please.
I agree with Mr. Hurley. We're being asked to do two things. This is more of a question, I guess, to my fellow board members. I just want to, so that I'm clear on what we're talking about. We're being asked to approve the special permit for the in-law apartment with a variance for the fact that the apartment is not completely located within the existing dwelling. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that it's not existing at the present time. It's being constructed contemporaneously with the.
That's fine. I don't have any further questions except to say that just very briefly that the applicant could have, with respect to the variance from the requirement to have the apartment completely located within the existing structure, the applicant could have built the addition in one step and then come back to the Board of Appeals to ask for the variance. It wouldn't need a variance at that time. You just come back for the special permit because it would all be within the existing building structure as amended. I just wanted to say that out loud so that, because I think that us approving this, if we vote to approve it, us approving the variance from that particular requirement is good. It makes sense in saving money for the applicants and also saving time of the board from having to hear an additional case.
Well, I agree, Nick. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I agree as well, and I'd suggest that the applicant's thinking in this regard is somewhat sophisticated because many times we have fancy lawyers appearing before us on very similar issues, and they ask for the same relief that you're asking here because it's a much more effective way to do the project, and it's certainly much more cost-effective and convenient. It's just the work of requires the structure to be resolved at some point in time. That particular, I'll call it an idiosyncrasy, would be cleared up. But that's a technical consideration. I agree with my colleagues in their reasoning. I actually, taking a look at the plot plan and the proposed addition as revised, it really is much cleaner and much more in cohesiveness, I guess, than I would have expected. So I think it doesn't create really an awkward structure, which I feared was going to happen. I think it looks great, and I don't think that anybody but a land surveyor or an architect would notice the differential, to be frank about it. So I think this is a great addition for the applicants, particularly for the applicant who's going to be living there. I think it's going to be comfortable, and I think it's a win situation for everybody. I'm pleased to vote in favor of both special permit and the requested variance. So all of those in favor of granting the requested variance pursuant to section 3A9F and the special permit for the construction of the temporary apartment, please say aye.
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 Aye. Well, congratulations on your special permit and hearing. Took a little while to get there, but I think you'll find at the end of the day, even though there's a delay and nobody likes delay, particularly going into winter time, it's something we'll be very proud of and happy to have. So what we'll do here is we'll prepare this decision. It generally takes a couple of weeks to prepare the decision. It has to be circulated amongst the board members and signed up. It then will be filed with the town clerk. And at that point in time, technically, it's a 20-day appeal period, even though nobody has opposed your special permit and the variance in this particular. And at the end of 20 days, be sure you get a certified copy of your variance and special permit and record that promptly with the registry of deeds so the title to your house is kept up to date. And Ms. Sutton or Joe Prondak, our building commissioner, they can help you in that regard and tell you where to record it and approximately how much it'll cost. And it's not a difficult thing to do. And then your title will be insured and you can get a building permit and commence the project.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for your perseverance. So,
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
thanks, guys. We're going to adjourn the Board of Appeals hearing now. It's 7:20 according to my watch. So we'll be resuming in about 9 or 10 minutes on our regularly scheduled series of hearings.
And I'm happy to be saying a good night to you all. Thank you very much. I won't be staying on for the next hearings.
No, that's fine. We appreciate your appearing, and we appreciate Nick's appearing, and we know you're going to run off and watch Tuesday night football, Brian. That's what you.
Yes, indeed. Well, John, I usually read case law on Tuesday nights. It's a way of putting me to sleep.
What office are you running for, Mr. Hurley?
Anyway, guys, it's a pleasure as always, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, let me just say one thing. Nick, do you want to take a run at this?
Yeah, I was going to ask. I'd be happy to.
Okay, great. We'll
Great.
with Ms. Sutton that you can get access to the file.
Thank you. I'll coordinate with her.
Super. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
You don't need
Good night.
the rest
Thank you.
of the other hearings, I think, right? I'm not on for the rest of them.
No, yours is free, and you can read case law along with Mr.
I was going to say, I have it right here, ready to go. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
You all set with everything, Jim?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a nice facility.
So we did one legal, I'll do the other one tomorrow. And set something up for January. We have to do it for 141 Alvin Ave. So Nick went in on Thursday's legal instead. Is that what he did? This is standard. This isn't much. Did you wave to him?
What's that?
Did you wave to him?
No. Hi, Mr. Prondak. How are you?
I'm well, Mr. Leonard. How are you?
Great. Great. It's good to see you again.
And likewise, and to you.
How do you like our new and improved quarters?
Oh, so is that COA?
Yeah, we're at COA. We have the whole building to ourselves.
Oh, nice. So we can have a party afterwards.
Well, I think that we have plenty of room. We won't disturb any neighbors, that's for sure.
Mhm.
I assume that means you're going to be keeping 6 feet apart at all times from all other party goers.
Well, yes, Beverly has her tape measure of about 7.5 feet away.
There you go.
She's sitting across from me so she can make faces at me if I'm doing bad things. We have about 2.5 minutes. Are you Mr. and Mrs. Todd and Nico? Good. Nice to see you. We'll get going in about 2 minutes.
Sorry, we had the mute button on.
Okay. Oh, there's Mr. O'Brien. I hope. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Hi, John.
Good to see you.
Joe.
Virginia, are you going to appear visually? Or are you just being attached by telephone?
No, I'm I'm actually here, but I'm feeling shy today.
Okay, so you're acting incognito.
I'm incognito.
Oh, that's fine. But I appreciate very much Virginia is substituting at the 11th hour for Michael Brown, who was unable to make this particular meeting. So we really sincerely appreciate Virginia going out of her way to give us an hour and a half or 2 hours of her time this evening. Okay, it looks like it's 7:30 according to my watch here. So why don't we call this hearing to order? I'm going to have to do some of the formalities here. It'll take 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll kind of set up the hearing for anybody who's out there in virtual land and is wondering what this is all about. Okay, this is our 7:30 hearing. I should introduce myself first of all, because I'm thinking we had a 7 o'clock hearing, which was kind of unusual. So at 7:30, my name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening, board members Frank O'Brien and board member Virginia Donahue King. This is the application of David Tadanico and Aaron Tadanico. The applicants live at 27 Coolidge Road in Milton, Massachusetts. And they filed an application dated October 13, 2020 with the Board of Appeals. They're seeking a variance from the terms of Section 6B1 of the zoning bylaw. Their residence was constructed in 1950. It's a single-family residence, and it's presently in conformity with the zoning. The applicants are proposing to build a 26-foot wide by 1-story front porch addition to their home. And a portion of this porch would be 7 foot deep, with the roof being 34 feet 6 inches long, as it would extend across the entire porch and the entry door adjacent to the garage. We have a plot plan that's been filed. It's dated September 26, 2020, and it shows that the porch addition, as proposed, would be a distance of 13.2 inches from the front lot line, when 20 feet are required under Section 6B1 of the bylaw. To summarize the advertisement, we have the application, which is dated 10/13/2020, and the applicants suggest that they're building the proposed addition to enjoy warm summer nights watching their children play out front. We have a letter from our building commissioner, Joseph Prondak, who happens to be in the audience tonight. And Mr. Prondak writes on 10/2/20 that he's reviewed the proposal to build a porch as I've described it, that the property is in the residency district, that it was built in 1950. It's currently conforming, that he has reviewed a plot plan of the property by Donald Rosa. It's dated 9/26/2020, and it shows the porch addition to be built at a distance of 13 feet 2 inches from the front property line, when 20 feet are required under terms of Section 6B1 of the bylaw. Therefore, Mr. Prondak is, as a matter of law, has denied the application and advised the applicants that they have a right to seek a variance through the process that the Milton Zoning Board of Appeals. And here we are. We have, as part of the record, the plot plan that I've just described by Mr. Rosa. We'll have that as part of the evidence. So the rules of the board are, first, we'll hear from the applicants, and then we'll hear from any person present who wishes to ask the applicants any questions. We'll hear from people who wish to speak in support of the variance application. And we'll hear from any persons, if any, who want to speak in opposition to this particular application. The hearing this evening is obviously on the Zoom system, virtual system, but we're also recording this on our own tape recorder, which is the official record of this proceeding. I've read the contents of the file, so without further ado, Mr. and Mrs. Tadnico, welcome to the Board of Appeals. Why don't you tell us about your proposed addition and why the board should grant this application for variance?
Hi, thank you for having us. So we're proposing to build a deck or a porch on the front of the house. Like I said, it's for family enjoyment mostly. We have little kids and it's a very family-friendly neighborhood. So that's the purpose of constructing it. Also, we think it's going to fit into the neighborhood well. It's going to bring up the appearance of the house to kind of better fit the neighborhood. It's a very well-kept neighborhood. So we put a lot of thought into the design of the porch, and we hope it fits in well. And we have letters of support from some neighbors. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to upload them before the meeting or what.
Well, that's all right. You can do it either way. Usual form is to submit them in advance of the hearing. But why don't you tell us which neighbors have indicated in written form,
Sure.
or otherwise, who support the application?
So we have the abutting neighbors to our right, the Botellos, and we have to our left,
What's that address? The Botellos?
Mark and Joan.
Mark and Joan Botello.
Okay, what's their address?
They're 33 Coolidge.
33.
Yeah, I forget what Matt and Beth are.
Matt and Beth at 21.
21.
And then to our left, we have Matt and Beth Hanlon.
Yep.
And
they're 21 Coolidge.
And they are 21 Coolidge.
Yeah. Great.
And
we verbally discussed it with the people across the street from us, but we didn't have them submit us a letter. But they're aware of the project and saw the plans and, verbally gave us the approval of, they didn't mind.
Okay, great. What are their names?
Bora.
Kyle and Borna, Borna, and the last name is DeBerry. I think it's Dibieri. I don't know what number they are.
Okay, we've got a list somewhere in here, so we can find out how you actually spell their last name. And so they're verbally in favor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Why don't you do you have any other things to tell us about your proposal?
No. That pretty much sums up our proposal. Like I said, we put a lot of thought into the design to try to fit the neighborhood, and we hope it, we just hope that, the neighbors obviously agree to our left, right, and adjacent, and the rest of the neighbors are on board with us.
Oh, and so I'm sorry, because I was operating on some of my notes that I had, and I really neglected to indicate, because it's the question I was going to ask you. So with the application is filed a framing plan and elevation plan by Rogue, R-O-G-U-E Design,
Yeah.
Christensen. And it shows the proposed deck and the details of the proposed roofing and the proposed surrounding structures that accompany the deck. Just let me ask you this. Number one, is the deck that you're proposing to build in substantial conformity with this Rogue design plan that you've submitted with the board?
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. And is the materials and the color scheme of the proposed deck, is it going to be consistent with the existing house?
Yes.
Well, we're changing the color.
Oh, well, it'll be a blue, but it's going to be a different color blue. Right now we have a blue house. We're thinking about going like a darker color, but yeah.
Okay, but it'll be reasonably consistent with.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not going to be an
It
orange.
won't be hot
won't.
pink.
Orange.
You feel rest assured. And in terms of if you get your variance here, when would you be intending to construct this deck? Mid of the spring, or?
I'm not sure yet. Given the times right now, we might elect to kind of wait a little bit.
Okay. You've got basically, if you get your variance, and I don't want to presuppose anything, you'll basically have a year within which you start construction on the deck.
Okay.
The only thing I'll tell you, because I just don't want to forget it, is if you get your variance and for some reason, whatever it may be, physical, financial, pandemic, new precedent, whatever it may be, if you're delayed in constructing the deck, please come in and file an application to extend it, because we can extend it off for a period of, I think it's 3 or 6 months. But if you come in after the variance has expired, then you're going to have to start all over again. You never want to do it. So if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. O'Brien, do you have any questions of the applicants?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mrs. King.
I do. As Mr. Leonard said, I came into this kind of late, so I don't have the file on everything. And I had a question on exactly where the porch is going to be. Is that on the full side of the full face of the front of the house, or where and when does that stop?
It's the full face of the house. And we have like a little side entry. We're doing we're trying to tie that in so that it's essentially, the whole
There's
house.
between the garage and the main house, there's a door into the house that way. So we'll extend it to that side door, but not over the garage or beyond the garage.
Yes. Yeah.
So above that, on the second floor, there is an extension, and so that would be a little bit wider at that point. Is that correct? I looked at the picture of the house, and the house, that side entry is kind of recessed a little bit.
It is, yeah. They'd have to like drop the roof down a little bit to kind of marry the roof lines in, I think. And then there wouldn't be floor for that part of the deck, right? That'll be like
right. That's on grade. It's really just a portico, if you will, kind of just built over the door, and we're just tying it into the porch.
So that wouldn't be a covered type of. This is not a covered porch.
It is a covered porch on the main portion. But the secondary side, like the side entry where the door is essentially a portico that, it's just a cover, and we're tying it into the to the porch that we're building.
Okay, and at the same level, my understanding is that correct?
The grade changes a little. The roof line will be the same, but there'll be like, one or two steps down. It's like a little bit of grade change from the driveway.
Okay. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't have any questions of the applicants. I think they did a nice job explaining their proposed addition. Let me ask, other than the a sense of which the applicants have offered from abutters, is there anybody present tonight virtually or on the telephone that wishes to also speak in support of this application for variance? Okay, there's no such person present. Is there anybody present this evening who, whether virtually or by telephone, wishes to ask the applicants any questions about the proposed addition, or who otherwise wish to speak in opposition to this application for variance? And there's no such person present. So unless you have anything further to add, what we'll do is we'll end the evidentiary portion of this hearing right here and now, and we'll discuss this application in open session and vote on this variance application. So, great. Mr. O'Brien, do you want to be heard first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be prepared to support this application. This plan, as the applicant has expressed, shows a lot of thought. It looks like it will be something that will add to the appearance of the home, which is a nice looking home to begin with. I think the intrusion is not overwhelming. So since it's going to be built consistent with the plan that's on file with us, should the variance be granted, I'd be prepared to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mrs. King, please.
Sadly, I have concern about this. I know that this is a neighborhood where all of the houses are built the same distance from the front lot line. And so having something protruding on one house and leaving the others kind of behind, I think that would take away greatly from the neighborhood. The sight lines are going to change from the people on the same side of the road. I know that you've got the okay of the people on either side of you, but the sight lines will change as you go from people further away on the street. And that isn't something that they would have expected in buying on a street like this, where the homes are quite uniform on how they're placed. Let's see. And I think that the difference between 13.2 and 20 feet is not de minimis. It's nearly a third of what is required is being taken away. And I do have a problem with that, because I feel like it is going against the zoning code that is meant to make have the houses set back and look somewhat spacious. If there's one in all of those houses that are different, it's going to cut down from the attractiveness of the neighborhood. So I see this as a problem that I could not agree that it would be something that would be beneficial for the neighborhood. I realize, it would be beneficial for the applicants, and I feel for them, but I just feel that could be the beginning of a neighborhood that, gets a bunch of porches on them, and then it says, well, gee, now I want to enclose the porch because we need that extra little bit of room. And I see this as perhaps the beginning of a real erosion of the zoning laws on Coolidge Road and the adjacent streets that are all very similar, except for the older end. So I am inclined to not vote for the application.
Okay, well, let's further discuss this. Let me pick up the ball and run with it. From my perspective, I agree with Mrs. King in the sense that this is not a de minimis variance. To be de minimis, it probably would be a foot or something less, maybe a little bit more. But that to me is not determinative. My principal concern here would be several things. First, whether the proposed addition is an improvement to the existing dwelling and would benefit the family that's living there. And I think the evidence 100% shows that the addition would benefit the family, the existing family. I look at the addition and I think it's really well done. I'm not an architect, I'm not a builder. I think it's tasteful. I think it adds a dimension of modernity, if I can use that word, to a home that's a 1950s home. And I would say I don't really, I don't know that I'd be overly concerned if each of the abutting neighbors or anyone else in the neighborhood wanted to do this, in the sense that I think it would take an older neighborhood and bring it up to much more modern standards. And my feeling is that it wouldn't be a bad example for the neighborhood. This is a good example for the neighborhood, and I would hope that the neighbors would look at it and say, well, we could do something similar to that that's tasteful and consistent with our dwelling. They do understand that these are architectural matters, and I'm not an architect and I'm not a designer. And I'm kind of a basic guy, and I take a look at it and I say, does it look good and does it improve the house? And I say yes on both counts. I also tend to think that one of the determinative issues for me is the neighbors on either side of the house. They both assent to this application for variance, and then there's a third neighbor who assents to it as well. So they certainly think that it's tasteful and in good keeping with the standards in the neighborhood, and maybe an improvement to those standards. So my view of this is I would certainly, if one of the neighbors were objecting for legitimate reasons, not because of neighborhood spats or some reason, then I would have great difficulty with this application. But in its present form, I think it's tasteful. I think it improves the residents. I think it'd be helpful to the family. And we're both abutting neighbors assent in writing to the application. And I tend to think that I think applying the zoning bylaw as written under these specific circumstances may be somewhat on the harsh side. I don't see this addition causing other people over in the town of Milton to start building porches like this. But as I say, if they wanted to, and there's still a significant distance from the front lot line here at 13.2 inches from the front lot line. I don't think it's so infringing on the front dimensions that overly causes me concern. I just tend to look at it differently, I guess, from Mrs. King's initial viewpoint here. But I can be convinced to the contrary. Mr. O'Brien, do you want to weigh in on this at all? Or?
Mr. Chairman, if I weighed in, I'd simply would be to agree with you. I think it's a matter of opinion. I see this as a addition to the neighborhood. I note that it is a well-kept neighborhood. I would also note that there are several other homes on the street which have obviously had work done to them in terms of renovations. So while many of the houses on the street are similar, they're not all identical. And I see the applicants having gone the extra mile. This is not a in my view, this is not that something that is a slapdash tossed against the front of the building and walk away from it. This plan, at least the plan in front of us this evening, shows attention to detail. And as you point out, Mr. Chairman, no concerns have been expressed this evening, and has been represented to us by the applicants. They have the support of the neighbors. So I don't share my colleagues' concerns.
Okay, Ginny, maybe let me ask you this. Is there some type of revision or improvement to the plan that you'd suggest that could make it more palatable to your view on this matter?
No, I don't think there is. I see it as a rather large addition for a front of a house. Something that might make me change my mind would be if, everybody on the street didn't have a problem with the sight line changing. And the reason I say this is because there's somebody that had talked to me. I know her for other reasons, and she knows I'm on the Board of Appeals. And in her neighborhood, she was 2 houses away from the house that wanted something to go up. And so she felt like she didn't have standing to say that she didn't want it there. And so she didn't. And she regrets it because it really does bother her. And while, the person next to her and between the applicant and her apparently had said it was okay. I don't remember if that was the case or not, but assuming that was the case, she felt like she was not really able to express herself because she didn't want to hurt her neighbors. Mm-hmm. So she didn't sign anything to say she was in favor of it. She didn't write a letter against it because she was unwilling to create neighborhood problems either. So I feel that when something is changing the looks of a street quite so much, this is not a neighborhood where all the houses look the same. They're all colonial, certainly. They all have, 2 stories. They all have, a garage and a breezeway that may have been turned into a family room. But it's a colonial neighborhood. And colonials, I don't think, need to be updated to look newer than they are, as long as they're in good repair. But I feel that it's enough different that it does abrogate. Is that the right word? It takes away from the clout of the zoning bylaw. And we've talked about, is this unique in any way from any of the other plots that we would, be granting this because of some hardship or other with the plot, the size of the plot, the elevation of the plot. And I'm not hearing any of that here that would allow me to change my mind. So, if everybody on the street was happy with it and actually signed that they were happy with it, I could be perhaps persuaded otherwise, but I don't have that in front of me right now.
Well, let me just see if I can get some definition from you, Jimmy. If you say the subject property is in the middle, and you've got the abutters on either side approving the application or assenting to the application. If you went out another 2 or 3 houses in each direction, and you did the same across the street, and the applicants could secure the signatures of those neighbors saying that they assent to the application for a variance and they don't think it would interfere with the sight lines of the neighborhood, would that be sufficiently satisfactory to you?
If it were to all of the people that would be getting notice on this application, I think that would go a long way to doing that.
But that would, let me ask Mrs. Sutton, how many people received notice on this? It would be 25 or 30 people, wouldn't it? Yeah, if you do a circle of three, yeah, we draw a circle of 300 feet around the property, and Mrs. Sutton suggests that there may have been, how many such neighbors notified? Approximately.
Right now.
Body. 40 neighbors received written notice of the application.
And I would suggest that perhaps the neighbors on backing up to it on Meredith Circle, they, you know, it doesn't affect them at all. And so I'm not suggesting that they should be included, but you know, the other ones should be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. It's a question of defining how many people, how many of those residences would have sight lines to see the subject property. Some of these houses that are on the same side of the street that maybe 6 houses down wouldn't be able to see the proposed addition from their property. So I was wondering if we could somehow define the number of people that you think would be. Mrs. Sutton says there are 13 properties on Coolidge Street that they received notices. What if we could get 10 out of 13 people to sign petitions, or 12 out of 13, or something like that? Would that help you in making a decision?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I think I'd want to know why the other people hadn't signed, if there were people that were not included in that. But yes.
Okay. Well, let me say this to the applicants. Getting variances, as you probably know, it's somewhat technical and sometimes very difficult. Would you like to take a run at talking to your neighbors on who would?
Yeah. So I'm happy to talk to more neighbors. We didn't obtain like a list of signatures. We asked if a few neighbors would write letters of support. So that was why we just had 2 letters, because we just figured our abutting neighbors would be fine. I'm happy to have people sign it. I just don't know. I mean, our neighborhood's trying to be like socially distanced. So I don't exactly know how to get a signature from somebody without getting close to them.
Perhaps an email. If you could get emails from neighbors of neighbors, that sort of thing.
I have some of them, but there's like, there's also like an 80-year-old woman who I know won't open her door for me.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, I could definitely email. That would be more pandemic friendly.
Right. And then, certainly, you can bring their email back in again. It doesn't need to be signed itself.
Okay.
And maybe the 80-year-old lady still has a landline that you can look up.
And you said that she sent it to the application, that could be fine, or you could just put something in an envelope and put a stamp on
Yeah,
it.
an email that was from, somebody on the street, and you printed it off and were able to submit that to the board. I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And what I think we could do is we could continue this hearing for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks of Miss Sutton, because she's looking up the calendar as we speak, and give you sufficient time to do that type of survey.
Okay.
And just get as many signatures as you can. If there were 13 properties and you could only contact 10 people, and give us the 10 people.
And certainly the houses closest to you, you've got a good start on it with the 3. But you know, if you can't get the very first person on the street that's, you know, at the opposite end of you, or, you know, something along that line, you know,
Yeah.
I want to be reasonable on this, but I want to make sure that it's not something that is going to be a detriment to one of your neighbors.
Okay. We've gotten verbal consent from so many just discussing the plans. We don't think it'll be an issue. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
So
Why don't we schedule this out a couple of weeks and, you know, get more information, and then we can have a vote when we reconvene?
yeah, no, that sounds fine. Mrs. Sutton is suggesting that a couple of weeks may put us into Christmas week.
Mm.
And,
That could be problematic, yeah.
I think we should.
I'm not going anywhere. I don't know if anyone else is, but
No, I think most people are staying in. I think that's what the applicants are afraid of, that
yeah.
as accessible as they should be. But maybe sometime in January. I doubt that you're going to do this construction in the middle of winter. So if you take we'll take 3 or 4 weeks and
5,
Give-
6, or 7, January 5th, 6, or 7.
okay. Mrs. Sutton says January 5, 6, or 7. Is that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
I am in court. I guess it's evening.
Mrs. King, how does that fit with your schedule?
Well, depends on.
Any one of those days is fine.
And Frank, are you traveling? Or are you still around?
No, nobody's traveling. Let me check. I just want to make sure it doesn't conflict with any of the other major hearings that we have ahead of us, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Sutton is shaking her head that it doesn't. But
And I'm looking at 5, 6, and 7. And I am good for any of those days as well, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
okay. Yeah. Let me ask one question. Is either of the 5th, 6th, or 7th, is that acceptable to the applicants? Is any day better for you than others? It's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Monday,
7.
Tuesday, Wednesday. Any of these days except for Tuesday.
So like Wednesday, we'll go for the 6th.
Okay. So ideally, maybe like the 6th would be good. The 5th is the only like absolute cannot.
Okay. So why don't we do this? We'll continue this hearing until 7 o'clock on the 6th of January. And what I'd ask you to do is don't put off the acquisition of these signatures. Jump on it as quickly as you can.
Okay.
Once Christmas gets very close or the snow starts to fly,
Yeah.
difficult to talk to people and
Right.
it's awkward. And then when you've done your best to secure all the signatures you can, what I'd ask you to do is to send in those signatures to Mrs. Sutton. Okay. And to I'd do a little chart if I were you, listing the 13 residences, who owns them, and all of that. And that's all available right on the internet. The assessors database would have all of that. And if you have an assent, just write an assent or check next to it.
Okay.
Then if you have, let's say, just bear with me, you're at 27, let's say 17 Coolidge, if it exists. If you're not able to get a signature for 17 Coolidge, and the reason is they've gone to Arizona for the winter, just
Right.
put that down, okay? Just indicate that you've called 5 times. Oh, good. Mrs. Sutton says that she's going to send to you the abutters list for Coolidge Road, so you can have that. And then just write, if you can't get an assent, maybe how many times you tried and whether it was by mail or phone or whatever, and they're deceased or they're in the hospital or whatever. They just...
And do you want me to upload this to Permit-I? Or whatever program you're using there?
No. All you have to do is, Mrs. Sutton's going to send you this and just email it back to us. That's
Okay.
all. And the more you can do that before the 6th of January, that will then enable me to send it to Mrs. King and to Mr. O'Brien, and we can look at it ourselves So if we have some questions about it, we can get back to you, and we don't find ourselves on the 6th continuing this to another hearing in February.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to continue this hearing to the 6th of January at 7 p.m. And I say two things to you. Have a great Christmas with your
Thank
family. And secondly, I hope we have good weather that interim period of time so you can get these signatures. And then thirdly, Happy New Year and see you on the 6th of January.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, we appreciate it.
Merry
Take
Christmas.
care.
Good evening.
Yes. Okay, we all set for our third hearing of the evening? Alrighty, I think we are. Let's see. Lynn Averill and Peter Gravelis. Do we have our applicants present? Hello.
Hello.
Alrighty, are you all set to start your hearing?
Yes.
Okay, great. You're Lynn Averill?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're going to call to order our 7:45 hearing, and this is the application of Lynn and Averill and Peter. Is it Gravelis?
Yes.
Okay, great. They're the applicants, and their application is dated September 29th, 2020, on file with the board, seeking a special permit pursuant to the terms of Section 3A9 of the general bylaws, seeking to use a portion of their house as a temporary in-law apartment for the applicant's elderly parents within their dwelling at 157 School Street in Milton, Massachusetts. The application reads in accordance with the special permit, which was originally granted by the board on June 4th, 2015, which expired on June 5, 2019. This section of the bylaw limits temporary in-law apartments within single-family dwellings to a period of 4 years, subject to the issuance of a special permit, which can be extended by the board if you apply for the extension within the 4-year period. That's a fair summary of the advertisement. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With us this evening is board member Francis O'Brien and board member Virginia Donahue King. The rules of the board are such that we'll first hear from the applicants, and then we'll hear from people who may have questions of the applicants, and we'll hear from people who want to speak in support of the application and who possibly may want to speak in opposition to the application. I'll summarize the application. We'll have as an exhibit, I summarize the advertisement. We'll have as an exhibit for this particular hearing the application, which is dated September 29th, 2020, which indicates that the applicants want to renew this temporary apartment because Peter's elderly parents are both in their 90s, and they believe they can care for them better if they were in this in-law apartment. We have a letter from Birch Amer, a code enforcement officer, to the applicants. This is dated February 11th, 2020, indicating that the original special permit that they had for this temporary apartment has expired on June 5, 2019, and that if the premises are still being used by Warren Francis Averill, they had to reapply for a special permit. And I understand from reading the file that Mr. Averill has passed. So we have the letter from Mr. Amer, the code enforcement officer, and we have the application. And we have the earlier application for the in-law apartment in 2015. And we have the denial by Mr. Prondak dated 3/4/2015. And we have the actual decision of the Board of Appeals on this application. And the decision is dated June 4, 2015. And this in-law apartment was approved by me as chairman, by Emmanuel Alves as a board member, and by board member Virginia Donahue King, who's been able to sit on this application this evening. So I think that's a fair summary of the record at the present time. So Ms. Averill.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. O'Brien.
If I may, before we hear from the applicant, a quick technical question, if you will, and maybe a clarification from the chair. As you noted, the prior special permit was approved by the board and involved a situation where the person is now unfortunately deceased. And the notice and whatnot is styled as a renewal of an existing permit. Is it a renewal, or are we actually considering a new special permit because there would be a new proposed occupant for the in-law apartment? I'm just a little confused.
Well, the application asked for a renewal of an expired special permit, which I think that that is something that cannot be done as a matter of law. So the application was styled in the manner requested by the applicants, but the applicants are not lawyers. And in point of fact, when the original special permit expired, then the applicants are required to seek, this is a new special permit under the bylaw. So it's not an extension, it's not a revival, it's not a renewal. In my view, this is an application for a brand new temporary apartment for one of the applicant's elderly parents. Are you in agreement with that?
I am in agreement with that, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Averill, do you want to proceed with your application?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us about your application for a special permit for a temporary in-law apartment and why the board should exercise its discretion to grant the special permit.
The special permit is for care of my husband's elderly parents, and we had used the temporary apartment for my dad. He has passed, and the situation and the housing was just better for everybody in our whole family, and we're just kind of seamlessly moving it on now to my husband's parents.
And where are your husband's parents presently living?
They're currently living in Andover.
Yep. And are they living by themselves, or are they living in some type of assisted living quarters?
Currently, they're living by themselves, but they have caregivers going into the home.
Okay. And is the special apartment that was constructed pursuant to the June 2015 special permit, is it in the same condition that it was when the special permit was originally granted?
Yes, it's in the same condition.
You haven't incorporated that back into the dwelling in any way?
No.
Okay. So the plans and specifications that are on file for the 2015 special permit would be the same for this special permit. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Have you had the opportunity to either secure the written assents or the oral assents of abutters to your property at 150?
Yes.
Okay. Have you? I don't see them as part of the file, but have you submitted them to the board?
I didn't submit them. I just sent them to them per Beverly Sutton.
Oh, well,
Not through email.
how did you send them? Did you send them in the mail?
By letter.
Okay. When did you send the letter? Do you know? Is it they don't have the file?
I'm not sure the exact date, but it was whenever I got the letter from Beverly. She sent me an email.
Well, I have nothing.
Okay. Did you retain copies of those letters?
I was not told to do that, so no, I did not.
All right. Do you know the how many assents approximately? How many assents?
There's 3.
Okay, 3. Do you remember the names of those people who've assented?
Yes, of course.
Well, that's great. Why don't you tell me who they are?
One is the last name is McLean.
Mm-hmm.
The last name is Knight.
Yep.
And last name is Tebow.
Okay. And the McLean residence?
Excuse me, can I interject here? Because I'm Liz Tebow and that's a straight out lie.
Well, I don't know where you are, Ms. Tebow. I've heard your voice, but why don't you hold your fire for a few seconds here and we can see if we can clarify this, okay? We'll hear from you in a second.
Perfect.
Yeah, the McLeans, Miss Averill, where do the McLeans live?
147 School Street.
And where is that in relation to your property? Is it diagonal or a couple of houses away? Or?
One house beside me.
Okay. And do you remember who signed that petition?
It was a letter that was sent.
Okay. And did both of the McLeans sign the letter?
No, it said to send a handwritten letter. Beverly Sutton's directions.
She said to send a handwritten letter?
Yes.
To her?
To the abutters.
Oh, okay. And did the abutters send something back in response to that letter?
No.
So how do you know the McLeans assented to your application? Did they talk to you about it?
No, I just didn't hear anything back from them.
Oh, I see. So since they didn't respond to your letter, you assumed they didn't object to your application?
Correct.
And is that the same thing for the Knights?
Correct.
And that's the same thing for Miss Tebow, who...
Correct.
Okay. So just so that the record's absolutely clear, you don't have any signatures from neighbors who have specifically assented to your application for the in-law apartment. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Great. Did you have an opportunity to talk with the McLeans, the Knights, or Miss Tebow about the application?
No.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to talk to any of your neighbors on School Street about your application and to see whether they approved of it or had questions or disapproved of it?
No.
Okay. When this application was originally approved in 2015, do you remember whether you and or Mr. Gravelis went around and talked to the neighbors about the in-law apartment to get their agreement to it?
There was a letter that was sent out to the butters, the same way that we did it this time.
Okay. But that was it. The abutters didn't sign any petition or affidavit or anything in support of your application in 2000.
Correct.
All right. Other than what you've told us, is there anything else you'd like to tell us in support of your application for the in-law apartment?
No.
Okay. Let me see if my fellow board members if you have any questions of you. Well, let's ask Mrs. King first. Mrs. King, do you have any questions of?
I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about if we know anything about how the neighbors feel. I understand. I assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there's been no complaints about having it there during the time from 2015 until 2019. Is that the fact? There's been no calls
Correct.
to the police or anything about that you've become aware of, which you would be if they had called the police.
Correct.
Okay. No, I have no further questions.
Okay, Mr. Frank O'Brien, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this, as you well know, we as a board have sat on these applications for special permits several times. This is a unique part of the zoning code because in the town, because it is specific and particular, and each one of the requirements has to be met. And unfortunately, I don't see the record of this hearing at the moment meeting these requirements. However, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of the applicant relative to that, so maybe we may be able to put some of those on the record.
I think great idea. Why don't you proceed, Mr. O'Brien?
So, looking at the requirements of the bylaw, and I apologize for taking this step, but it is something that has to be done step by step. The applicants for the special permit must be the owners of the one-family dwelling in which the temporary apartment is proposed. Ms. Avril, who owns the home at the moment? Who's on the deed?
Peter Grabelisi. And Leanne Averill.
Okay. And you own, are you able to provide a copy of the deed if that was required?
Yes.
All right. Is this something that you provided at the last time that this, last time a special permit for this particular apartment was issued?
No.
Okay. It is at your attention, Ms. Averill, Mr. Gravelis, to occupy as the principal tenants the remaining portion of the home, the so-called
Yes.
principal dwelling quarters? So the answer is yes. Okay. The second part of the bylaw requires that the special permit shall specify the names of all tenants who will occupy the temporary apartment. can you provide us with the names of the people who would be occupying the temporary apartment?
Yes,
Would you do so now, please?
yes. Michael Grabelisi and Josephine Grabelisi.
And what is their relationship to you and Mr. Gravelisi again, please?
They are my husband's parents.
Okay, thank you. So they would meet the definition of the types of folks who are covered by the bylaw. Have you been able to provide and submit a design in adequate detail showing the layout of the temporary apartment and specifying all the changes required to be made by the existing dwelling? And before I ask that question, Mr. Chairman, does the current special permit contain or the file for it contain a plan for the proposed in-law apartment? Don't have the physical file in front of us today.
Mrs. Sutton is looking at it, and it has the old
Decision.
Yeah, we have the old decision from the application, but we don't have the earlier file with it with any definition of the in-law apartment. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Prondak has his hand up. Do you want to be heard on that issue, Mr. Prondak?
Just briefly, there is a plan in the file for the existing, the way the apartment exists now, the way it had been laid out for the previous special permit.
And is that as part of the building inspector's record?
It is. It's also in this file. I did review the file before tonight. It is in your file, in the electronic version of the file.
See, I don't have the electronic version of the file in front of me. So we have that plan, Mr. O'Brien, and we can, Ms. Sutton can supply you with a copy of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will take it, given that apparently there have been no changes made, that the rest of the requirements of the bylaw are met. The building is of adequate size, parking is adequate, things like that. The other technical requirements of the bylaw have been met. If I may ask the building commissioner that directly, Mr. Chairman, with your permission.
I was going to do it if you didn't. Go ahead.
Hi, Joe Prondak, building commissioner. I believe the physical apartment is in compliance with the requirements of the bylaw. However, what I would comment on is that, and hopefully to help the applicants understand, that the bylaw specifically and the special permit specifically names some persons that are entitled to live there as in the temporary apartment. And then when those persons are no longer residing there, that the temporary apartment must be incorporated back into the main house. And they're also required to submit a report on a yearly basis to us stating that, and that had not been done on the prior special permit. And in fact, it expired, and it wasn't until our code enforcement officer reviewed all. We did a review of all the outstanding temporary apartment special permits and had to notify this particular applicant that their permit had expired.
Thank you, Mr. Prondak. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions at this particular time. I appreciate your forbearance as we go through. As I mentioned, this is a very specific portion of our zoning bylaw, and that is because in-law apartments are not favored by the zoning code. So it's not we have to make sure that all of the T's across the I's are dotted. And unfortunately, based on the record I had heard beforehand, I did not hear the needed punctuation, shall we say.
Oh,
Thank
I
you, Mr. Chairman.
appreciate your comments and your assistance, Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Prondak. It's been very helpful. Mrs. King, do you have anything further to add?
No, I don't.
Okay. Mr. Prondak, do you have anything further to add at this point in the proceeding, or should I move on?
Sorry, unmuting. I do not.
Okay. So let me ask whether there's anyone out there who wishes to be heard in support of this particular application. Okay, and there's no such person present. Is there anyone present here this evening, virtually or by telephone, who has questions of the applicant or otherwise wishes to speak in opposition to this application for a temporary in-law apartment?
Yes, I would. This is Liz Thibault.
All righty. Where do you live, Liz?
I live at 167 School Street, which is directly adjacent to the Gravelessis at 157.
Okay. And we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. And I would like to first go back to the original application that was submitted. Back in 2015, and it was in the name of Warren Averill. Unfortunately, Mr. Averill passed away before he ever moved into the dwelling. So at that time, per Mr. Prondak's previous information, the occupant should have at that time informed the town, which they did not do. So in my opinion, as we had already discussed, that this is not a renewal, this is a new application. Secondary to that, Mr. and Mrs. Gravelessi moved in their nephew into the in-law apartment. Clearly that was never indicated to the town. And as a direct abutter to that, I'm very concerned that they feel that they can move other folks into their home. So with that, I definitely oppose this. Another reason why I oppose this is there is not sufficient parking in the premises for a secondary dwelling. Currently, all parking spots are occupied inside their front gate. So when their nephew resided at the home, he would park on the curb or up above the curb, which is adjacent to a fence. So our driveway is directly next to that parking spot. So when we would either come into or out of our driveway, if his vehicle was parked there, it would block the sight line for all of School Street. If you're familiar with School Street, the neighbors, and I can name several neighbors, have over the years complained both to the Department of Transportation, even all the way down to Canton Ave, as well as the, I don't remember the committee, but within the town, trying to help with the speed issue that we have on our street. So it's imperative that we have very clear sight lines to leave and come into our driveway. I can tell you that there's any day in the afternoon, there's tens of kids that are playing out in the road, or not in the road, but in the, in the neighborhood. And it's imperative that these kids have the opportunity to see both ways when they cross the street, especially due to the speed issue. I'm concerned that, especially with two elderly people, as Mrs. Averill has mentioned, they have caregivers, so there will be people in and out of the home who I would assume would then park right where the nephew parked. I can also tell you that I've never received a letter other than the notification from the town from the Gravelessis about this in-law apartment. I also have in writing that the neighbors also do not agree with this, especially Knight, who was mentioned to assent.
You say you have a letter from Mr. Knight saying he...
Yes, I have in writing that they do not agree with this.
Have you provided that and filed it with the board?
Nope, because I just got it because I didn't know that Mrs. Gravelesi was going to say that she assented both myself and another neighbor.
Okay. Why don't you continue, ma'am?
So for those reasons, I'm in opposition to this in-law apartment. We live in a neighborhood where, specifically on this side of School Street, there are no two-family homes, and it very much takes away from the attractiveness of this neighborhood.
Okay. Just give me 1 second.
And one other reason, or one other thing I should also mention is to the point where when her nephew was living in the dwelling, we had to put large stones next to our lawn because they felt that it was appropriate to drive up onto our lawn area through our driveway so that they wouldn't have to go up the curb. So again, that's proof that there's not sufficient parking.
That's okay. This is important.
Okay, can I?
Yes, dog.
Mr. Prondak, you're being recorded here. Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions if I could, Ms. Tebow. Do you know?
2258.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, just hold on.
2124.
Can't you mute, John?
Whittier Street.
Joe, you need to mute yourself.
Oh, you know what? I have to. Oh, hold on.
Okay, there,
All right.
there. He's muted. So, Miss Tebow, do you know the name of the nephew that was occupying the premises?
I do not know the name of the nephew, but I could get it.
How old was he?
I would say he was in his early 20s.
Okay. Was he living there alone, or was he living there with other people?
I believe he was living there alone.
Okay. Do you know when he began occupying the in-law apartment approximately?
No.
Okay. Do you know when he ceased occupancy of the in-law apartment?
I can't give you a specific date, but it was several months, if not years.
Well, there's a big difference between several months and several years. Can you be a little more?
I mean, it was a long enough time that I knew he lived there. Meaning he was not a visitor who was there for, a week or two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she had informed other neighbors that he moved in, which also means that they agree that he was living there.
Okay. And during this period of time, I'm not being critical here. I'm just asking you a question. Okay?
Yeah.
During this period of time, did you register a complaint with the building inspector's office that this nephew was living in the premises without permission?
No, I didn't know that was possible, but we've issued several other complaints in reference to other things.
For the in-law apartment?
For the parking and driving up on our lawn so that they could access the access additional parking that I guess they assume is additional parking.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Ms. Tebow. Let me ask my colleagues. Mrs. King, do you have any questions of Ms. Tebow?
Can I, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just add to this? So during this conversation, I've been texting back and forth with a neighbor, Maren Knight, and she's asking who she can reach out to because she would not support such a permit. Their lot and space is too tight. This is verbatim. She said, I thought whatever permit they wanted expired, and I assume it was related to her father moving in with them years ago, but he passed away. So there's a lot of, within the neighborhood, there's a lot of misunderstanding because the letter that I received in accordance to this actual meeting doesn't say anything about who the permit was for. It's very vague in terms of what exactly is happening. So I would suggest that, and I can tell you both Maren and myself, who Mrs. Gravelesi earlier in this call said she contacted, neither one of us have been contacted previously. And Maren lives directly across the street from Lynn Ann.
Okay, but she's not participating in the hearing virtually.
No.
Okay.
They're living in New Hampshire right now, so I bet she doesn't even know that this is happening.
No, that may be and that may not be. Let me just see if Mrs. King, do you have any questions of Ms. Tebow?
I guess, you know, we're now looking at having residents in the apartment that do in fact fall within the rather strict standards of the bylaw on temporary apartments, and they certainly do need some help, which I'm dealing with an elderly mother right now who is in need of a lot of help, and so I feel for the Gravelesis. They certainly do need the help of their children. Is there anything that some kind of concessions that the Gravelesis could give that we could write into the permit that might alleviate your concern so that their needs could be met as well as yours?
Sorry, are you referencing Liz Tebow?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest concern is the parking issue, which unfortunately cannot be alleviated because their house is quite close to the front street. So, and I believe because I too have elderly parents and I know how many people come in and out to help assist with their care. I know that there will be several cars. I've never seen personally either Michael or Josephine, so I don't know what their condition is. But I also believe that one of the parking spaces they currently do have and that they utilize on a daily basis actually blocks the stairs that goes down to the in-law apartment, which will further exacerbate the parking issue because it's one less parking space that they would have to park one of their current vehicles in their driveway.
I guess we need to understand a little bit more about the needs of the people that would be moving in. If it requires a stairs to go up and down, I don't know if they're mobile, if they're able to do that walking easily or not. Would they be leaving a lot? I assume they don't have a car, but you know, do they get out? Do they need that stairs? Do they need that space to not have a car in it?
Ms. Averill, do you want to respond to Mrs. King's question? Hello? Is the applicant still?
Oh, your mute is still on.
My mute?
No. Ms. Averill's.
Can you take Ms. Averill's mute off?
There it goes.
Ms. Averill, are you there?
Hello. Michael and Josephine both do not drive. There are 2 spots in front of the house that are adequate parking spots, or they could park on the street, which is not, which would be another option. They are able to ambulate up and down stairs.
So the issue then for the Tebows and the Knights would be with the caregivers coming in and then leaving cars in a place that would be in the way, basically.
Yeah, they could park in the driveway.
There is room in the driveway?
Yes, there's 2 spots in the driveway. There's 6 spots at the residence.
There's how many?
6.
6 parking spots?
Yes.
Oh. Then I'm wondering what the problem was with the nephew not parking there. But we don't care about him right now. We do care about Michael and
And I'll
Joseph.
have a clarification. The nephew never lived in the in-law apartment. He lived in a bedroom above our garage, for clarification.
Okay. So if we were to write into the special permit that caregivers would be parking in the driveway, how would that affect the Knights and the Tebow's feelings on the application? Would that make it more palatable for you?
Again, I believe this is a question that is directed to me, Mrs. Tebow. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, yes, that would definitely, I think, be key, that the parking would have to be in the driveway. But I can tell you, as to your point, why did the nephew not park in the driveway? Because there are not 6 spots in the driveway. Currently, they have 3 cars. 1 is able to park in the garage and 2 are in the driveway parked. And to access the garage, you would have to have a space open. Same with accessing either of those other cars moving. If the parents are able to, go up and down stairs, and there is an available room within the home, I don't understand why there has to be a separate dwelling. This is a neighborhood that does not have any other in-law apartments. And to Mr. Prondak, point earlier with the previous permit, once the person has deceased, the permit becomes void, so to speak, and then that apartment was supposed to be incorporated back into the home. So if there's a room that they can access in the main dwelling, I don't agree that they should have a special permit for a separate in-law dwelling.
Well, as somebody who is rather sensitive about intergenerational living, I don't know if you've had to do that or not, but it is different. And having, your own kitchen, which is basically the reason that people have a temporary apartment at all. It's just basically that you have a stove. I think it's a legitimate want for a family when they have elderly parents that, would like to downsize and get some help from family. Which is why I'm trying to ask questions that will alleviate pressure on both sides so that this could be something that can work in the neighborhood. I realize it's difficult. You live next door to each other. And I, quite frankly, don't remember when I drove by what the parking situation looked like there. So we don't have the materials. COVID has made things a little bit harder for having a hearing such as this with the materials and so forth. So, if we had pictures of how things looked, if we had plot plans showing where cars could be, we could, make more determination of fact than we can right now, which is regrettable. I'm not sure how else to proceed with this.
Mr. O'Brien, do you have any questions of the applicant or Ms.?
I do, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. And I'll direct my my comments to the applicant. How old are the proposed occupants of the in-law apartment?
94 and 96.
Okay. How are they doing? Are they
They need extra assistance by us.
the application used the term respite care. They are not, obviously it sounds like they need extra assistance, but they're not in the best of health, but they're not in the worst of health, shall we say. I want to maintain some level of privacy
Correct.
for them. Okay. Do you have existing arrangements with caregivers, or are there arrangements that would need to be made? Have you folks discussed that?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions at this point, at this particular point.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I don't have any further questions either. Let me ask, and thank you, Ms. Tebow. Let me ask, is there anybody else present this evening who has either questions of the applicant or wishes to otherwise speak in opposition to this application? Okay, and there's nobody else there. So, Ms. Averill, did you have any final words to sum up your position on your application?
No, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Prondak, do you want to be heard on this application at all? Not that you have to.
No, I have nothing further what I already stated. I'd just like to say I apologize for the last little snafu with my unmuting.
That's okay, Joe. It happens to all of us under these difficult circumstances. Thank you for showing up tonight. So if nothing needs to be said, let's, for the present time here, at least close the hearing and discuss it in open session. Mr. O'Brien, do you want to be heard first on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to style my comments as preliminary in nature. This is a difficult case, as these usually are. However, this is a unique aspect of the zoning bylaw. I do not normally go through chapter and verse of the requirements of the bylaw. And as I mentioned, the bylaw is specific. The bylaw is drafted to be specific because these types of apartments changes are not favored by the zoning code. Town meeting has made it plain when this was passed that these types of this type of relief should be granted sparingly and only with in exacting circumstances. The applicant has enjoyed the granting of relief under this bylaw before. So the applicant was under notice regarding the requirements of the bylaw. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons, things did not work out. The property in question is rather large. The parking situation is somewhat confusing. I think based upon the things that I have heard this evening. I'm not without sympathy because one of the reasons why this bylaw was even passed at all was on humanitarian grounds, easy for me to say. So I'm mindful of that as well. Having said all that, given the strong opposition that I'm hearing in the neighborhood and the fact that, at least in my opinion, on all of the aspects of the bylaw was met, at this particular point in time, I'm leaning toward not supporting this application for relief, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Which may be a first for me.
Mrs. King, do you want to be heard?
This is a very tough one. In many ways, I want to grant it. The need is there. I think the very nature of it being a temporary apartment rather than a long-term apartment is something that we have to consider. People in their 90s have needs. It's a whole lot better if family can be overseeing some of those needs, if not, giving them all, certainly. And I understand where the opposition is coming from, in that there seems to be some discrepancy whether the apartment was being used as a temporary apartment by the nephew, or if he was merely part of the home's living regular bedroom areas. I don't even want to get into that, but clearly there was some aggravation with him being there. And I wish that had been addressed at the time, so that it perhaps could have been alleviated. Instead it's festered and it's made for some less than neighborly situation here. And so I go back to the whole point of it being temporary. If it were granted for 4 years, the applicant's parents would be 198. And I hate to be looking at brass tacks here, but people living that long are rare. And they might have good genes, and they could last until 122 for all I know. But I also use the word temporary as to if there is aggravation this time around with the use of the temporary apartment, to be certainly 4 years is much less than forever for any aggravation that might happen. That being said, though, there's an issue about following up on things if they are unsatisfactory. Are there, and I don't know the answer to this, I don't think there are what is the route that a neighbor would take if there were things that needed to be looked into that, it was not working out well? What recourse would a neighbor have if things got into a situation that became problematic for the neighbors or the neighborhood or whatever? Where would a complaint for that go? And could that be rectified or not? And I guess I have to ask my fellow board members and Joe Prondak about that.
Well, my guess would be, but I think it's more than a guess, would be somebody would file a complaint with the building inspector's office for enforcement of the rules and regulations regarding these apartments, and that the building inspector would either inspect it himself or send one of his enforcement officers out to do an inspection, and that could be multiple times sometimes known and sometimes unknown, and would file a report. And if the building inspector deemed that the conditions of the permit were not being adhered to, and there were serious and material violations of the conditions, that they could apply for revocation of that permit. But Mr. Prondak, is that a fair summary of what would happen under these circumstances?
That's correct. Any complaint of a violation or non-compliance would come to my office. We would look into it. The bylaw is somewhat specific in that it says if the special permit shall terminate upon a violation. So if I found a violation, I would so notice the holder of the special permit. That of course would be subject to appeal back to the board.
Thanks, Joe. Does that help, Mrs. King?
Yes, it does. It appears that there's a good vehicle to use in case things are problematic in the neighborhood and the neighbors want to make a report about that. That being said, the other thing is there is a law in Milton against overnight parking. So, and I've seen this happen many times, that if somebody complains about a car being parked overnight on a street, that car gets a ticket. So it's not something that, people are allowed to do, and they don't ticket if nobody cares. But if somebody makes a complaint, if there's a car in the way, they do get ticketed. So they don't do that again. So I think that this is an application that is worthy, and I would like to try to accommodate that by just kind of following the rules of Milton, that you don't park in the street, and the caregivers are going to have given a place to park for whatever time they might be needed to be there. The other thing is, I don't know if their caregivers are going to be coming as often as they were before anyway. That could change over time. So it really matters a little one way or another. So given that there is a way of addressing problems that might arise, I would be in favor of granting this. I think it's important for the neighbors to know that they have a vehicle and they shouldn't be afraid to use it if need be. But at the same time, some elderly people that need a little bit of help and are many miles away from Milton right now, and many hours perhaps with traffic, having them closer to children is a good thing. So that's my reasoning on what I am prepared to do right now.
Thank you, Mrs. King. My view of all of this is that both of my colleagues, Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm striking Mr. O'Brien, and Ms. King, are both right. And they're both right for the right reasons. I think that this application is somewhat of an anomaly in the sense that if it started out, it was an assented to application, but then there were no assents. And then I heard from, I think it may be Ms. Thibault, that after the special permit was originally granted in 2015, the occupant, Mr. Neville, died before he ever had an opportunity to occupy the special permit. And if that's the case, the special permit was granted by his use, and the special permit automatically expired. So for reasons that are unknown, that we really never fully explored here, for about 4 years of time, this special permit remained in existence with nobody living in the premises. Now, Miss Averill suggests that the nephew didn't live in the premises and lived in the garage, I think right in the room above the garage or somewhere else in the premises. There's no evidence of what use, if any, was put to this special permit. And so when I look at the evidence that way, I harken back to Mr. O'Brien's thoughts that this portion of the bylaw is one that is strictly construed. It's enforced very narrowly. And it's a use that's not a preferred use in neighborhoods. And so when Frank has his reservations about whether to vote for this, I sympathize with him. I think his reasoning is correct. And then I hear from Mrs. King, whom I know has elderly parents. And when I hear the travails of Mr. Gravelisi's parents living far away, in failing health, needing support, what better place could there be than this temporary apartment for that type of support? Why would you want to force these people into a nursing home or other assisted living quarters? It borders on cruel. But on the other hand, the applicants have not complied with the special permit law with any substantial certainty of fidelity. And so we're faced with this issue, which is really a conundrum. Maybe they don't deserve to have a special permit in-law apartment there, but nobody doubts that there's a serious need for it. And so under these circumstances, this is a tough call. And I tend to have the sympathetic feelings of Mrs. King that if you have to make a call and a judgment like this, what's the best solution? Maybe the best solution is to do no harm and not force Mr. Gravelisi's parents into continue living where they are, which sounds totally unacceptable, or going into assisted living or some other type of quarters. And having seen some of these places, they're not places where you'd want mother and dad to be. So I think a combination of rationales decides this case, in my view, and that is I would seriously consider voting in favor of this application, really not on behalf of what the applicants have done, but on what the need is. And I think what I heard, their representation that they will strictly abide by and construe all of the obligations that's imposed on them by this bylaw. And that if, as and when the parents no longer reside in this premises, that they'll immediately advise the building inspector and apply this section of the bylaw with fidelity, and that they will try to work with their neighbors regarding parking issues and the like, and because you want to have this as a healthy situation for everybody. And so I would tend to side with Mrs. King's philosophy on this, but I also agree with Mr. Fitzgerald. And so and therefore I would suggest that we fashion some type of rather informal probation for the applicant on this particular application, and that we not only require specific fidelity to all of the terms and provisions of the bylaw, which they have promised to fulfill, but that we have this premises subject to close supervision by the building department with some regularly scheduled visits to make sure everything is fine and to make sure that the neighbors are still pleased with the way things are going. And maybe more importantly, some unannounced visits for inspection of the premises in a friendly and cordial way, and not in a law enforcement way, but just in a cordial way to see that that everyone's living up to their obligations. I think that would work. I don't doubt the good faith of the Miss Averill or Mr. Gravelis. I think they'd be thrilled to have their parents there. And yet I think that they should be positive in trying to make sure that the parents' presence in no way causes any difficulty whatsoever to the neighbors, and that they go out of their way to try to accommodate Miss Tebow and the other neighbors. So this ends up to be a healthy and a friendly occupancy. I understand the age of the parents, and I think that's the only way to fashion a win-win situation here. I think to deny this special permit, while it's warranted, it would be warranted as a matter of law. I think as a matter of sound discretion, doesn't do Mr. Gravelis' parents justice and fairness. And I think if we're going to exercise discretion, I would do it on the basis of Mrs. King's philosophy, with the requirement of strict performance of the bylaw and close supervision by the building inspector's office, and with the hope that the neighbors can all act cooperatively here in everyone's best interests. So that's my view of this. Mr. O'Brien, do you want to be heard?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And I will readily acknowledge that denial of the relief being sought in this hearing is a harsh result, and perhaps overly harsh given the spirit in which the bylaw was passed. As I mentioned earlier, it is to be strictly construed. These types of arrangements are not favored, but at the end of the day, looking beyond the black and white on the page, the spirit of the bylaw is, as you suggested, to allow folks in their later years the opportunity to live in settings that are closer to family, much more comfortable. And I'm also very much mindful of the type of intergenerational arrangements that my colleague has mentioned. My mother-in-law lived with us until she was 99, and we were fortunate in having her be able to do so. Having said that, I do think that there is a path forward based upon your suggestion regarding some strict adherence to conditions. I am mindful, however, of placing additional burdens on an inspectional services department that is already stretched as it is. I note that in the past, for example, the previous special permit relative to the existing in-law apartment in the dwelling was 4 years. Perhaps a special permit of a less period in time. And I would bow to your advice, Mr. Chairman, if it is within the purview of the board to issue a special permit for a lesser amount of time. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't. I don't, but I would presume that we could. It is special permit. It's a matter of our discretion. I think the statute reads up to 4 years. And from that, you may be able to construe that it could be for a lesser term.
I would suggest that whatever special permit might be issued, and I would favor the issuance of a special permit on humanitarian grounds. It would be considerably less than the 4 years that is standard, and that it includes specific conditions relative to parking, the maintenance of off-street parking. I would note the previous special permit relative to the premises limited the amount of parking on the premises to 5 vehicles. Looking at it, having driven by it, that looks reasonable to me. It may need a bit more enhanced enforcement, such as you have mentioned, but with those sorts of conditions, as a compromise and on humanitarian grounds, I'd be prepared to support a special permit with those conditions.
I think that's well put, Mr. O'Brien. My suggestion would be that we adopt a term of perhaps 2 years, but with the proviso that the applicant should fully understand that all they have to do is file an application to extend the term for another couple of years, and absent the objections of the building inspector's office, or maybe after an inspection by the building commissioner's office, that 2-year extension could be granted without going through the folderol of another application and another series of hearings. Does that make any sense?
That does, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Kim, what do you have to say about all of this?
Well, I'm wondering if we even need to cut down the term of it to down from 4 years, because if there are problems with it, the neighbors will complain. They will make a report to Joe. Joe will check it out, see if they're following what should be followed and the conditions, and that it can terminate it can terminate for not following to the letter what the special permit requires. So I hate to put extra burdens on people by having to come back in half the time than to go for the 4 years when there is a solution that people can pursue if they find that they need to do that.
Mr. O'Brien, what do you think of that? That Mrs. King, I think, may be making consummate sense, as long as we specifically include in the decision that these conditions are going to be, in light of the previous history of the property, are going to be strictly construed. And then the neighbors understand fully that they can bring any complaint to the building inspector's office anytime they deem appropriate. It may avoid another extension application and another hearing, and it may be a simpler way to proceed.
I'll reluctantly go along with that. And one of the reasons why I would reluctantly go along with that is because I don't think the parties involved in this particular hearing tonight are going to forget what happened this evening. So I think that folks would be on notice and hopefully both on their best behavior in one case and fully informed of their rights and abilities on another. And I'm sure that our building inspector and his staff are, I know that they're very good and very diligent regarding the execution of their responsibilities, and I would expect them to continue in the exemplary fashion that they have previously. So given that, and mainly because of my confidence in the good work of the folks in the building department, I'm prepared to agree to that.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mrs. King, are you on board with all of this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so all those in favor of granting a special permit with the terms and conditions which we've presently discussed, please say aye.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure you can.
Those terms include what?
Well, they
The off-street parking or?
yes, no off-street parking, that the terms and conditions of the special permit be strictly adhered to. In some recitations of perhaps of past deficiencies in compliance with the technicalities of the special permit.
Oh my goodness, we got lost again.
Well, that's all right. Are you still there?
I'm
Hello?
here.
Okay.
I'm
So
not
Jenny,
sure that anyone
we-
else is though.
No, Jenny, we can still hear you.
Okay, because I was seeing
Well, the first thing
pictures were not moving.
Frank talked
So
about.
yes, I'm fine with that. Yes.
We're going to stay away from that. We're going to issue it for 4 years. And no off-street parking.
Or off-street parking.
No on-street parking, John.
No on-street, yeah.
No on-street.
Well, I think we have to be careful on that. I think we need to be a little specific on it, saying, they can have a party and people can park on the street. I think what the neighbors are concerned about is regular parking from somebody that has business in the house. So say a caregiver.
Yep. Okay. Anything else, Frank, that we're missing?
No, Mr. Chairman, but I think Mr. Prondak might have a comment.
Mr. Prondak, what do you have to say?
Just that the applicant should understand that we do have to do an inspection on the premises because we have to issue a new occupancy permit for this as well. And I think it might be helpful if the permit is granted. It might be helpful to meet the parents if that's feasible, just so I can verify who's there and it becomes familiar to us.
Okay, so it has to pass the inspection of the building commissioner's office and some type of a conference, whether it's a Zoom conference or in person. Were you comfortable with a virtual conference, Joe?
Yeah, either that or a brief mass meeting is also appropriate, unless things change and get worse.
Okay.
Although the applicants, a Zoom might be better.
Does that make sense to you, Frank and Jenny?
Yes.
Yes, I think it's also analogous to what we tend to do with variants and whatnot, that the construction has to meet all the requirements under the building code, et cetera.
Okay. Any other conditions that we need to specifically reference?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think so. I can't think of any at the present time, but if we do, what I'll do is I'll take a run at this particular decision and then can circulate it to Mrs. King and to Frank and make sure we're touching all the bases on us. That makes sense?
Sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Yes. I think, however, we have neglected to take a formal vote for the record.
Right. We're getting up to that.
All those in favor of granting the special permit requested with the conditions that have been specified, please say aye.
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 So I guess sorry for the long-winded hearing, but maybe at the end of the day it'll be worthwhile. So I'll try to crank this out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll circulate it to the other applicants and get it in final form and see if we can get it filed. Do you have any, either Ms. Averill, do you have in mind when Mr. Gravelise's parents intend to try to occupy the premises?
We were getting this approval first, and I will now go back and talk with them, and we'll discuss a date.
Because I'm sure if they come to visit during Christmas time, I'm not sure whether that's permissible. I can't figure out the rules and regulations these days. But I mean, I'm sure that wouldn't be an issue to anybody here. But we'll do our best to knock this out within the next 2 or 3 weeks and get it signed up and get everyone on their way. Okay? It makes sense?
Thank you very much for your time. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone, and have a good night and a happy holiday. Mr. Prondak, you're waving at me again.
Oh, no, I was just waving goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's good. I thought you were going to cite us for some type of violation.
Mr. Chairman, don't we have one more hearing?
We do have one more hearing, yes.
Okay.
We do it. And do you have any idea what it involves?
Another in-law.
Another in-law apartment.
But hopefully a little simpler than this. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, we'll have our next hearing.
Do this, yeah.
The Lanane hearing. Give me like 35 seconds, and we'll get going. That makes sense. Stuck to the chair. Okay, folks, sorry for the delay and sorry to conduct the hearing at 9:30 at night. Hopefully you'll have a little better luck than the last hearing. We have our fourth hearing of the evening. This is the 8 o'clock hearing at 9:30. And let me summarize the advertisement here. This is an application of Kevin Lanane and Christine Lanane. They're seeking a special permit and variance regarding building a 2-story addition to the left side of their property at 36 Chesterfield Road in Milton. And the addition would be used for a temporary apartment of approximately 800 square feet for the applicant's daughter who has special needs. This residence was built in 1939 as a single-family home and currently conforms to the terms of the bylaw. Here, the temporary apartment would be located in an entirely new section of the house. The applicants have to apply for a variance in order to allow the construction to proceed. With the construction of a temporary apartment, at the same time as they're seeking a special permit is required by section 3A9 of the bylaw for the temporary apartment. So my name's John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight is board member Frank O'Brien and Virginia Donahue King. the rules of the board. We're going to first hear from the applicant. We'll hear from people who want to speak in support of the application, people who have questions of the applicants, anyone who wants to speak in opposition to the application. For the hearing tonight, we have the application itself. It's dated 10/21/2020. We have a plot plan of land by Continental Land Surveyors showing the subject property and the proposed in-law apartment. And we also have some architectural sketches of the subject property by Blackbird Architecture. Looks like they're in Holliston, but it's hard to read. It's so, the print is so small, the copy is so small. But it's actually a very beautiful addition. It's really, it looks great. We have some interior plans of the addition in relation to the subject property. And we also have another drawing, which actually shows the incorporation of the temporary apartment back into the existing home at some time in the indefinite future. We did receive a letter in support of this application. For some reason, I couldn't print that letter. But it's from James A. Coyne and Anne Marie Coyne of 1066 Brook Road in Milton. And they write to the Board of Appeals affirming their support for the Lanane's variance to construct an addition to their home at 36 Chesterfield Road, so as to create an apartment for their daughter. Allowing the variance would enable them to keep their family together and offer space that is needed to care for their child. Chesterfield Brook and Pleasant Street neighborhoods are closely knitted in all that they do. A strong sense of neighborhood pride exists. Many neighbors in the area have recently added on to stay. We have personally known the Lanane family for over 25 years, and they are the definition of great neighbors. We offer no objection to their request. Thank you for your time and consideration, signed by Jim Coyne and Anne Marie Coyne. So we thank the Coynes for their very kind letter of support for the application. So Mr. and Mrs. Lanane, who's going to be making the presentation tonight?
I will.
Great. Welcome to the Board of Appeals. And I thank you for your patience, and I apologize for the lateness of the hour.
Yeah, we learned a lot from the last couple of hearings, so it was it's actually kind of interesting and helpful. So thank you.
I have to tell you, I learn a lot when I have Mrs. King and Mr. Fitzgerald on the panel, because they. I'm sorry, I keep calling you Fitzgerald. That's crazy.
John, we're from the same county, so don't worry about it, okay?
I know you. But in point of fact, it's Frank O'Brien. There was a Frank Fitzgerald at one time on the board. I must be recollecting from the past. Whenever they're on the panel, they're very thoughtful and try to blend sometimes very difficult legal and technical provisions with a sense of morality and sanity. So I learn every day participating with the panel. So why don't you fire away, Mr. Lanane?
Sure. Again, thank you for your time. I know it's been a long night for all of you guys, so I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. So we're applying for this variance for our daughter, Allison. We have a 20-year-old daughter, Allison, who has Down syndrome. She's very significantly involved. She requires quite a lot of care. From toileting to dressing to bathing, it's continuous. And one of the things that we've always said, we've always known that we were going to keep Allison with us for as long as we possibly could. That was always, there was never the option for us to put her, in a home or with anyone else. She's going to, stay with family. So really for us in the short term, we'd like to have this in-law apartment. My son-in-law, Danny, and my daughter, Molly, are here as well. And if you guys can give a wave. Is to get somebody in here to help us with the day-to-day stuff. like I said, it's a lot of work. The caregiving piece is quite a bit. And, you know, we love her. She's wonderful, but she does have some behavioral issues, which can be a little tricky. And we sometimes need some help with that. I've kind of pulled my back out a couple of times trying to move her, and, you know, an extra set of hands with that would be really helpful. So again, our short term is to really get some help for Allison here in the house. And our long term, as I said, is to always keep Allison with family. Molly and Danny are, you know, in our will as Allison's guardians after we pass. And so I think just sort of adding on the in-law, having them here, and ultimately the house would become theirs and they would have Allison as well. It would allow Allison to stay in this home, you know, for as long as possible, and for Christine and I to be with her until we go is really kind of what we're looking to do.
Well, that's admirable, to say the least. Anything else you want to tell us about your application and the project and when you'd build it out? And
we haven't made any plans as far as, you know, we're waiting to get this done. You know, basically right now, all we have is what's in front of you as far as the plans. We don't have anything else.
Yeah. And it's not something that we're in a rush for, but the sooner we can get it done, the more settled Allie can be. And that's really just basically our goal, is to kind of keep her life in Milton, which is where she's been her entire life. And with Molly and Dan just recently got married, and so they're starting their life, but to incorporate kind of what we do on a daily basis so that they can understand, because it will be their responsibility down the road. And so this was an option that we thought would work for all of us.
The letter from the Coins was great. We didn't ask them to send that. It was wonderful. But we did, you know, we talked to a whole bunch of neighbors, and we haven't had any neighbors who have complained about it yet. They all got letters. We run around, and we did get emails from several of them that we asked, just the abutters. But we've talked to most of the neighbors on the street, and as Mr. Coyne mentioned in his letter, most of them have already put on additions, pretty sizable additions as well. So I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with it.
And we do have some of those emails, but I printed them out, but we just did it this weekend. So I didn't know where you wanted those, or if you need additional letters or signatures, you can just let us know and we can get those.
Yeah, let's see how the hearing progresses, and we'll see if we need them or not. A lot of that stuff is adversely affected by the virtual nature of the hearings that we have, and it becomes difficult. But I thought the addition would be just a terrific place for Allison to live. It's really it's a wonderful transition in the house. It's consistent, and it's a great addition for a great purpose. So let me see this. Let me ask my colleagues, Mr. Frank O'Brien, do you have any questions of the applicants?
I do. Some very, very brief questions, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Sorry to have to put you through this, but it's the same sort of thing, just getting things on the record. So I want to, you folks own the house at the present time, correct? Mr. and Mrs. Lehane?
Yes.
Your names are on the deed, okay? And your intention to have your daughter occupy the home at the present time?
Yes.
Okay. Does your daughter have any additional caregivers?
No.
Not at this time, no.
Okay. I'm going to switch now away from some of the technical stuff having to do with the bylaw. As I mentioned before, it's very specific. Just a couple of quick questions about the plan. First of all, kudos to whomever you guys use, because the plan is very nice. But just to get myself situated, it would be to the left, you'd take down the garage?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And just because I happen to look at your place on Google Earth, I noticed that your neighbor's to the right. At the time we're doing an addition, is it, so there have been a number of such additions throughout the neighborhood. So in your opinion, this would be consistent with the type of additions and whatnot that have been in place in the neighborhood?
Yes.
And it would be your intention to do it in a manner consistent with the plans and to finish the addition in a manner consistent with the finish of the house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other questions.
Mrs. King, please.
I was going to ask about if there was going to be any live-in help, but it sounds like that's not going to be happening anytime soon. Is it anticipated that there might be live-in help?
No.
No.
We'd like to
Okay.
speak with family.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's really our focus. And we're very lucky because we have Molly and Dan, of course, right here. And then we have a son. And they're both, all three of them, amazing. And we couldn't be happier with who they are as adults. And they both my children and my son-in-law have made Kevin and I feel very good about the future, because when she was born, we didn't know. So for us, we hope to keep Allie with us, and so do they. That's our goal.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. It is.
Mrs. King, do you have any further questions?
No, that's it.
Okay. Let me ask whether there's anybody else out there in virtual land who wishes to speak in support of the Lenane's application. All right, there's no such person present. Is there anyone present who either has questions of Mr. and Mrs. Lenane or otherwise wishes to speak in opposition to this application for a special permit? Okay, there's no such person present. So unless you have something further to add, we will.
So no.
Yeah, most people under these circumstances quit when they're ahead. So why don't we suspend the evidence portion of this hearing and discuss the application in open session here and now. Mr. O'Brien, please.
Mr. Chairman, let me begin by expressing my apologies to the Lenanes for keeping them for so long, number one. Number two, perhaps adding some anxiety to the more anxiety. We sometimes forget. I mean, we're here all the time. We sometimes forget how anxious and these type of proceedings can be. Let me say two things in addition to that. Number one, this is a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. This is why the bylaw is in place. Hats off to you guys. I mean, you know what? Somebody's got to say it, but you're good people. So, God bless you for what you're doing. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be prepared to support this, and I'd support it enthusiastically.
Mrs. King, please.
Well, I have to say, when you were giving the background about your daughter and your family, I got goosebumps, and I got goosebumps just now saying it again. So thank you for being in our world. I think that this is, again, just a fabulous way to make sure that Allison has a bright future with people caring for her. And I'm enthusiastically for this application.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I agree totally with my my colleagues. Tend to make speeches. I'm not going to make a speech here. This is an application of absolute merit, and there's a great credit to the Lenane family. And I enthusiastically support this, and I wish all of you well. And I think that this is going to be a fantastic addition to the house, and will be of great benefit to Allie and your daughter and her husband for many years to come. And this is one of the rare times in these Board of Appeals hearings where you feel like you're accomplishing something that is beyond the general intent of a very, very good temporary apartment bylaw. So all those, let me do the formalities. All those in favor of granting this particular application with the usual conditions, say aye.
Aye.
So congratulations on your special permit. My only question to you is, you're going to be doing this construction in the spring, or?
Most likely, yes.
Okay, so there's no immediate need to get this out within 10 days?
No.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Fitzgerald, do you want to take a run at this one?
No, but Mr. O'Brien does.
Fitzgerald on my mind, he's, I don't know what this is. Listening to Donald Trump too much.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. I do want to add one thing, though, in regards to this, just for the applicants to be mindful of, is I know you sat through the last one. Special permit will be for 4 years. The usual conditions mean at the end of 4 years, Mr. Chairman, if I recall correctly, you have to come back in. It behooves you not to let it lapse. The prior hearing, be mindful of that. It'll be much easier if you come in and speak with the building commissioner and the folks at the Board of Appeals before it, so that things
Actually,
go through.
A couple of months beforehand, so that it can be scheduled, the hearing can be scheduled and written. Just to
Yeah,
cover
so
the
maybe mark it down a year, 6 months beforehand, so that you don't have a problem. So
We learned a lot in this last hour and a half.
So it was not all for naught.
The other thing which we didn't mention in the I guess it's the third hearing of the evening, and that is when you get your special permit, we file it with the clerk of the town, and there's a 20-day appeal period that has to run, irrespective of nobody opposing the application, and there's no chance anyone's going to appeal this, but it technically has to run. And when it does run, then your special permit becomes final and operable, legally operable. And you can get a certified copy of that and record it at the Registry of Deeds. Mr. Prondak can help you, Beverly Sutton can help you, what to do, where to go, how much it costs. But you need to record it in order to make it legally effective. Otherwise, the title to your house will be all messed up, and that's the last thing you want to do. With all of that, congratulations on your special permit, and best wishes for a
Thank you.
happy Christmas and a great new year. And we'll try to crank this out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, depending on Mr. Fitzgerald's business travel plans. He tends to be active sometimes, but hopefully, I think he's indicated he's going to be around. So then you won't have anything to worry about. Okay?
Folks, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good Christmas. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. With all of that, I've heard a motion to adjourn, the second from Mrs. King, and all those in favor, please say
aye.
Aye.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Jenny. Bye-bye.
We appreciate it very much. Thanks for your help.
Merry Christmas.